Coming up on this, our 18th attempt at a Linux Gamecast, we're going to try something a bit different. We've asked Reddit's Our Linux Gaming to come up with questions for the developer of the recently released physics platformer Beep. And they delivered. So, we're going to sit down with Kiaran, the developer, and ask the top 10. Now, just two things before we go. One, I really need to thank Patrick, the creator of Webcam Studio for Linux. Without him, this interview would not have been possible, and I suggest anyone looking into doing software video switching under Linux, have a look at ws4gl.org, the home of Webcam Studio. And two, you're going to notice me running about during the interview, tending to 3 monitors, hardware and software audio mixing, and carrying my tablet, trying to remember to ask questions. And it turns out no amount of practice will ever prepare you for the real thing, as made obvious during this interview. I hope that's not too much of a trouble. Okay, let's go. And welcome to the Linux Gamecast interview series. This time, we have former BioWare developer turned game developer, independent. Kiaran, how's it going, man?
Really good. Thanks for having me, Ben.
Oh no, this
nice
is
to be here.
Fantastic of you to take your time in order to do this. Now, we've decided to do something a bit different. We asked our friends at Reddit, the subreddit Our Gaming, to come up with questions for Kiaran, and we're going to take the top 10, which we have listed, and get his feedback. So, you ready
Sounds
to take
good.
a stab? All right, our first one comes from Nemata7, and his question: Beep sure has come a long way since you first announced it, and apparently you announced it on Reddit. What was that, a year ago?
Yeah, I think so, just to kind of let people know that I was building something and they could take a look at some of the alpha videos that I made, so yeah.
Right on. And
yeah.
His question is, has independent cross-platform development proved more challenging than you anticipated since leaving BioWare?
Absolutely, yes.
And I think one thing to ask before you get started, what exactly did you do at BioWare?
BioWare, I was a technical animator, so I was responsible for rigging the characters, anything that had to be animated, basically background props, characters, spaceships, stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay.
And for the most part, I was working on an unannounced project that was later canceled, and then I moved over to Mass Effect 2 just before it finished. So I have a few things in Mass Effect 2 that I did, but for the most part, it was that unannounced project.
Right. So you have found creating your own game a bit more challenging.
Yeah. When I first went into it, I had allotted myself about 9 to 12 months to finish Beep. Around the 9-month mark, we had maybe 2 levels finished, and the rest was not done at all. It was so we were really actually surprised at how much discovered work there was during the creation of Beep.
How do you keep yourself motivated doing something like that?
Well, I'm lucky in that I have a wife that keeps me on track and motivated. We had been discussing, we'd been sort of toying with the idea of doing our own game, starting our own business for a very long time, and so we had decent enough savings that we could spend the time to really make Beep how we wanted it. And it's unfortunate that it took a lot longer than we wanted, but at the same time, I don't regret putting the extra effort and money and time into Beep to make it what it needs to be.
And I do think that's one thing worth mentioning, that Beep is a 2-person project, you and your wife, correct?
Well, technically, yeah. There was three people. There was Francisco Furtado, was a guy I found just on the internet. Had a few conversations with him. Asked him if he'd be interested in doing the sound and music for Beep, and so he came on board about maybe 8 months before it actually released, or maybe more actually. It might have been even a full year. And just in his free time, he did a 14-track custom soundtrack for Beep and all the sound effects. So he's an awesome guy. That's Francisco. And then the artwork was all done by my wife. I did the programming, some of the artwork, and I guess all the level design too. Yeah.
Right on. So let's go ahead and jump into the second question here, which is
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to butcher this. Directrix 1. And this question is, what kind of testing setups do you use? And do you have one for each major distribution? And how do you ensure binary compatibility with the distro? I can't talk this morning.
Yeah. Testing is definitely, for an independent developer, one of the most difficult things to get right. I've talked with some other developers because this was my first time at it. I wasn't sure what the best route was.
Right.
And I asked them, what do you guys do? And they said, well, we just kind of have, one or two machines in our office, and we'll test it on that and then just push it out into the wild and hope for the best. I'm very glad that I didn't do that, because if I had, we would have really pushed out a product that would have been broken on 50% of the machines out there. So what we did is we will put out a call on Twitter or Facebook or whatever for people who are interested in doing a beta test. Get a big list of about 25 to 30 people, send the game out to them, and let them play with it for at least a couple weeks. Compile all that feedback, all those issues, and just churn through it. And that's how we handled the port of, because Beep was originally developed in Windows. That's how we handled the porting to the Linux. We had 2 Linux boxes in-house and about 35 people out in the wild running every kind of distribution and configuration that you can imagine, so that we could ensure the widest possible compatibility. But it's definitely a huge challenge. It's a good question.
And how far back do you go? Far as that was the second part of the question, but kind of want to add that in with the Mac OS line. How far back with OS X do you go?
You mean, what's my experience with the OS?
No, as far as the game compatibility, what will it run on?
Oh, it's actually...
No, we had the release of Lion, I believe, and...
Yeah, the game is currently in testing on Mac OS, and we're currently looking for testers. So if you're interested, please send me an email. It's support@bigfatalien.com.
Okay.
But yeah, we don't actually have the Linux build polished up yet, but it should work on almost any relatively recent version of the Mac OS operating system.
All right. So.
And same with Linux. It runs on any. We release with RPM and a deb and a tarball. So any distro out there basically can run it, as long as your hardware is good and you have the right drivers.
Good deal. So let's go ahead and jump into this third one here from Pauli, 1995. And this is very relevant because I believe you are now in the Ubuntu Software Center, correct?
Yeah, we just released on the Ubuntu Software Center last week. I think it was either Thursday or Friday.
Mm-hmm.
We went up in there, so yeah.
Have you been getting a few sales from that?
Yeah, we have. The sales are starting to trickle in now. I think as soon as it gets picked up, probably by the larger gaming blogs and Ubuntu blogs and stuff, we'll see a little bit more interest from that distribution channel.
That's good. And back to his question, he wants to know, how successful do you think projects like Desura and Steam for Linux will be if we ever do see Steam on Linux?
I keep hearing
according to Phronix every week.
Yeah, Phronix, exactly. He's always got some sort of inside information that Steam's coming to Linux. I've yet to hear anything from outside of that. I don't know. It would be nice. It would be really nice if Steam did come on Linux. I think Steam's a fantastic distribution platform. They've really nailed it there. Valve Software does a fantastic job. Beep is also available on Steam. So yeah, obviously that would be great, but I don't see it really happening. I'm not convinced that that's going to happen. As for Desura, Beep's on Desura, and we would love to add the Linux version of Beep to Desura. I have heard from the people at Desura that they are actively developing a Linux client, but they've been reluctant to sort of nail down a time for when that's going to come out. So again, these things can take a lot more time than you might think. It's pretty difficult to make a nice cross-platform system like that. Mm-hmm. But if they can get all the issues sorted out, I think Desura is going to be a really an excellent distribution mechanism. It's really nice.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
So let's run on so we don't take up too much of your time.
No worries. I love talking about this stuff.
Shazna points out, we'll ask the question, if you could improve some aspects of porting a game to Linux, what would they be? Better sound or graphic libraries, testing environments, and documentation. And says the reason I ask this is I help push package stuff. It helps get games into Linux.
Yeah. Well, luckily, I didn't actually have to handle any of the packaging myself because the two distributors for Linux that I'm going through, Gamolith.com and the Ubuntu Software Center, will both accept a tarball, which is nice because I'm not really a Linux developer. I have a limited experience developing in Linux. So when it came time to create the packages, I was a little bit confused. I went out onto the internet to try and find, the documentation and everything, and it's definitely scattered. So if there were a more centralized, more well-defined and automated method for building Deb and RPM packages, I think that would be a really big advantage for people who are just getting into Linux development. I found that to be one of the more challenging aspects. But everything else is actually surprisingly sane for how wild the system is. Linux is kind of the Wild West of computing. But the JCC compiler I find to be actually a lot nicer than the Microsoft compiler, which let quite a few bugs and beeps slip through. So I only found out they were even bugs in my program after trying to compile them with JCC, and it would bring up a flag saying this is not going to work. And I was like, what? It already works on Windows. But indeed, JCC was correct. There was a bug there. So that happened, I think, 3 or 4 times actually while I was compiling Beep for the first time.
So did you go back and correct that in the Windows build? Or?
I did, yeah. I keep the code for the game up on GitHub, on a private GitHub server.
Okay.
So whenever I fix something in Linux, then I'll push that up to the main trunk and then rebuild for all the different platforms that it's going on.
So let's jump into this here. This is cheating, as it says, I'm a cheat a little and ask a 2-part question.
Uh-oh.
So, yeah. How, as an indie developer with a little budget, do you tackle getting noticed by both gamers and the press? And the second part is, do you think appealing to platforms like Linux that have less overall competition get you noticed more?
Well, I'll take the second question first. Yeah, absolutely. I think supporting Linux is a really smart choice for the smaller developers right now. For me, it was, if I'm going to be realistic, it was probably about 3 weeks of work to port Beep to Linux. And that's not trivial, but it's not necessarily an undoable thing. Now, if I was in a AAA studio and we wanted to port, like, for example, Mass Effect to Linux, well, that comes along with so many extra libraries and dependencies that would really make that a complete nightmare and almost an impossibility. So you really have to sort of plan ahead if you're gonna port to Linux. But yeah, it can definitely improve your visibility in the games, in the online space. Now, as for marketing, that was the first part of the question.
Mm-hmm.
It's really just a matter of leveraging all the available social media outlets like Twitter, Facebook. I blog. Reddit's a fantastic outlet. And just kind of making sure that people can quickly find the information on your game and direct them, directly to a page where they can buy it, providing options for buying it. So people, for whatever reason, don't want to use Steam, they can get the game on Gamersgate or Direct2Drive or Beamdog or Desura. There's plenty. Just getting your game out there and available, I think, is your number one priority as a game developer. And I don't know. I mean, I could probably do a better job of it. Marketing is not my forte, and I definitely prefer the development side to the marketing stuff.
Do you find yourself having to kind of going into that wearing several hats?
Oh yeah, I might start my morning fixing a bug in C++, do a little bit of artwork for a store page or something, and then finish the day by blogging and sending out tweets. So it's kind of hard to you have to definitely wear a lot of hats as an indie developer.
Yeah, and we've kind of covered this one, but if you want to put a finer point on it in this, what is the main challenge with developing a game for Linux? And that comes from a person.
A person?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The main challenge in developing a game for Linux.
I guess the largest one you encountered.
Well, you know what? I didn't actually even have a distributor when I started porting to Linux. So for me, that was my main concern when I started the project. Was I knew I really wanted to do a Linux build of Beep, but I didn't know how to get on the Ubuntu Software Center, and
I've heard horror
Gamolith
stories about that.
Wasn't invented yet. Oh, really?
Getting into the Ubuntu Software Center.
Yeah, I kind of lucked out, I guess, because after I came out on Steam, they actually came to me, which is convenient because I tried to find even a contact information to get on that thing.
Have you?
And I scoured the Ubuntu website. I couldn't find how to do it.
Can you push updates to the Software Center now?
Yeah, you can. I think it might be kind of a manual process there's some work on their end to do the repackaging.
Okay.
Because they control the Debian packaging side of it.
Right. So.
But yeah, finding a good distribution method is probably the last remaining hurdle for Linux developers.
Okay. So let's go ahead, and I think we are down to just 3 more, plus we have a interesting question here at the end. This is from Lemming. Since projects like the Humble Indie Bundle show that there are indeed Linux gamers willing to pay for their games, which do you think is the major problem an indie developer must affront to port games to Linux? The fragmentation of the platform or the lack of the consolidated distribution channel like Steam?
Fragmentation is a big issue for sure.
Do you think we're pulling that together with what was the store that you
Gamolith?
Gamolith, that's right, and with the Ubuntu Software Center.
The Ubuntu Software Center, yeah. It's like the problem with the sound systems in Linux. We have the OSS, Pulse, and ALSA, and if we could all just agree on one thing, if we could standardize on something, it'd be better for everybody. And I think the same is true of distribution mechanisms. If you have a single place where you can go and know that all your software belongs there, so you only have to remember, you don't have to log into one place. You're reinstalling your system and you want to get your games back. You don't have to remember 20 different passwords on everybody on these individual vendor websites. So yeah, I think the fragmentation does end up hurting. Now at the same time, I mean, the great thing about standards is that let me rephrase that. The best standard is the one that I don't know where I'm going with that, but everybody has their own standards, and it's not an easy thing. It's like herding cats, trying to get everybody to use the same thing. It's impossible. Mac has done it just with an iron fist. They've said, there is the App Store, and that's it.
Now I have a question then. If there was a dedicated distribution for Linux gaming with set sound system, set version of X, and locked in, do you think that would be of any benefit?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. I think it would give developers a little bit more confidence to know that there's a place that they can go and leave their game, and everyone, it would benefit the customers too, because they can know exactly where to go. There's only one place, and if you want to get the latest and the greatest, that's where it's at. As it is now, that the onus is on the customer to sort of, scour the internet and find their own entertainment from various different locations. So it's suboptimal. We'll say that. We'll leave it at that.
Agreed. All right. So we're down to 3. Now this one, from QUBODUP. Do you have any input on how we should pronounce that?
I have no idea.
All right.
People in their Reddit names. I just use my own name. I don't know what's wrong. I guess I'm not into the
Reddit.
anonymity.
He doesn't mean anything negative by that.
Yeah.
Anyway, this one starts out as some good questions do. Hope this is not offending.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Here we go.
To me, the graphics in Beep are on a free Flash game level. I made the conclusion that the gameplay is also also on that level when I first saw the game, and he goes on to say he saw the video that we made at Linux Gamecast. But his question is, do you agree the visuals of the game can have this effect on potential players, and what did you plan to prevent this, and what's the reason for the quality of art? Programmer art? Time limitations? Now, that's a very opinionated question. So,
yeah, I mean, this guy's making a subjective analysis, and the fact of the matter is that a lot of people just simply disagree. I think, myself included, I actually quite like the art style in Beep. I think it's really actually exactly what we were going for. We wanted clean visuals that were appealing and that didn't detract from the action, so that you could actually, you could at a glance read exactly what's going on the screen and not get lost in a bunch of clutter.
it's
Now,
a
as for
very
looking
clean
like a
game.
Flash, sorry?
I said it's a very clean game. When I learned that between you and your wife, that's where most of the artwork came in, I was impressed by that.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I think it's. I mean, some people I actually just, as a matter of personal preference, just don't like that kind of clean vector style artwork. And that's fine. It's not for everybody. But there are a lot of people out there that really like that kind of look. And
So you're saying we won't get a gritty reboot?
no, I'm not going to do
Go for a
anything
nice
like that.
color of brown for everything.
Yeah. Maybe this guy likes more brown in his games. I don't know. But
All right, let's see. We have that. Okay, coming up next to last from Pfeiffer, I think. How has getting your game on Gamolith affected sales, and how hard was it to get the game onto that platform?
Again, I kind of lucked out with Gamolith. We were about 2 weeks away from having a build ready for Linux, and we still didn't have any distribution mechanism. So I was kind of panicking at the last minute and thinking maybe I'd brush off my PHP skills and build my own little web store or something through PayPal. I really wasn't looking forward to that. That's not something that I want to do with my time. But at the last minute, I got an email from Jonathan Pryor, the guy who runs Gamolith, and he came in and it was just perfect timing. He said, we're starting up this distribution portal for Linux games that works on any distribution, and we do all the packaging ourselves, so all you have to supply for me is a tarball. And I was like, that's perfect, count me in. So it was just kind of lucky timing, I guess. But yeah, it's worked out really well. The sales are good. It's a nice little revenue stream. It keeps trickling in, and it's a really nice way for Linux gamers to buy games.
So we've covered the 9 main questions for the game Beep, and there was one question that got -1 votes from...
-1?
-1. Gen P fault. And it's a bit of a trollish question, but WTF, OpenGL 2.0 question mark.
WTF OpenGL 2.0. Is he implying that Beep's requirements are too high? Maybe I don't understand the question.
I don't think anyone did, and that's why it's our troll question. But we're going to wrap up with that. Kiaran, tell everyone where they can find you again.
Yeah, so you can check out Beep at bigfatalien.com.
Okay.
We're on Steam, Beamdog, Impulse, Direct to Drive, Gamersgate for Windows. If you're on Linux, you can find it on Gamolith.com and the Ubuntu Software Center. And if you're a Mac guy, we're coming to Macintosh App Store in the next month or so.
Okay.
So check us out.
Sounds fantastic. And again, thank you for getting up so early and taking your time for this.
Thank you very much, Ben. I love the Linux Games Cast.
Hey, thank you.
Keep it up.